Exodus 3:13 through 14. Here it is. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Here are some possible UU translations. They are who they are. We are who we are. It is what it is. I'll give you a moment of time on that while I get ready to preach this. Breath in, breath out. You recording this? On February 9th, 2003, while still a professor of ed at Georgia Southern, as well as a seminary student, I preached a sermon at our fellowship building on Grady Street entitled, Can You Say God? Now, when I decided to write that sermon, that was in January 2003, when I decided to write it, I didn't realize that our then UUA president, Bill Sinkford, was preaching a sermon in congregation in Texas that very same month, calling for UUs to consider reclaiming a language of reverence. I did later learn about that, and I quoted him in the sermon. But his call was not my inspiration. Instead, I was inspired by the difficulty of our own congregation in using any reverential language, even when singing. You know the old jokes about why UUs are such poor singers, because they're reading ahead to see if they agree with the words. I do think we've made some progress on this since 20 years ago in 2003. Yet, while I was on sabbatical in London from mid-May to mid-June of this year, I felt the need to revisit this topic in light of events that occurred there, and Greg and I were there, and that I see occurring in the States as well. So I looked for this old sermon again. I initially just Googled it, and I found out that you can purchase from Amazon or Spotify or wherever you get your digital music, this recorded sermon on an album of all of my Can You Say sermons that I recorded many years ago. I recorded them on a website called CD Baby that made actual CDs of music or other recorded information available to folks, and for just the cost of making the CD and sending it to them. I did that back then so that the folks in the congregation could get the CDs and listen to them while driving. Back when we had cars that had, some of them may still have cars that you could stick a CD in and listen to. I'd forgotten all about that. It seems that CD Baby, though, without my knowledge, it's fine. CD Baby made all their digital material available to these folks like Spotify, and so that people can now just download them for a small cost. So if you're interested in the idea of reclaiming spiritual language and care to listen to these, you can find these old recorded sermons by just Googling Rev.Jane page and Can You Say sermons. It'll come up. But I wanted the text of the sermon, and I found that on my sermons page that is linked to both of my church's web pages. Thankfully, I put them all online way back when, because a virus destroyed my old computer files several years ago with everything I had from Georgia Southern and Meadville Lombard and everything else. But I had at least put my sermons up on something so I could find them. So now I'm going to share this remix sermon with you in two voices. My 2003 voice, then my voice was a little higher because I was a little younger, maybe, will be directly quoting from that earlier sermon. And my voice from 20 years later is this old gray-headed woman voice. All right, it's a remix. Now, 2003 Jane was blonde. Some of you remember me, blonde? You do. I was. So I brought this blonde wig, and I'm going to put this on when I share that old 2003 sermon and remove it from my 2023 gray-headed self. Are you ready? I don't know that it really makes me look any younger, but gives you a clue to which one I'm quoting from. Here I am. How do I look? Oh God, why in God's name did I decide to do a sermon on God of all things? I was up in that God-forsaken, frozen North Chicago land when I decided to do this, and God knows what I was thinking. But here we are. So for God's sake, let's get on with it. Can you say God? As noted by my somewhat exaggerated introduction, I can say God and often do. The word flows from my lips without conscious thought, especially when I'm experiencing anguish or ecstasy. I think I use it then because it's the biggest word I know. It's the most ultimate, unsurpassable, supreme word I know. But I don't say it or hear it much in this building. You know, it's funny. We say you can come to UU and you don't have to check your brain at the door. But some feel that they must check some words when they arrive. And one of them is God. Why is that? Now, I have to admit, that introduction probably uses the G word more than I used to use it in other sermons the whole year, even now. So perhaps I didn't learn anything from my own sermon. I think I have been learning, though, because I'm much more tolerant of hearing different kinds of religious language, even if I don't use them regularly myself. Perhaps I should retitle this sermon as Can You Hear God? But then that would have a double connotation, and that could be interesting as well, maybe another time. In any case, I went on in that sermon to share how I surveyed folks in our congregation to see how they use the word or not. So listen back to the 2003 Jane. First, it seems that most folks in this congregation have either rejected or never believed in the concept of God that is traditionally presented. That old white man in the sky just doesn't do it for us. So we don't use the word because we think that other folks will interpret it in this traditional manner. Or perhaps because we still interpret the word in that manner. Some seem to interpret the word as masculine and prefer a feminine or neutral word for deity. Others interpret it theistically, yet are not theists themselves. One member writes, I have no concept of God. My childhood idea of a white bearded man looking down at me from heaven still remains, I guess, but I long ago rejected that concept. Another member said, God is not something that has any meaning to me except for that which was brainwashed into me as a child. Second, we may not use the word because we have been hurt by those who use the word to oppress or ridicule or diminish us. One member shared remembrances of hearing God used in this way. Quote, I didn't and still don't enjoy it when people use God's name as a bludgeon to harass, dismiss, or manipulate other human beings. As in, God hates homosexuals, or God wants you to send $5,000 to my ministry, or God caused the Holocaust, or God says women submit to your husbands. End quote. Because of this pain, some members commented that the word carried too much baggage. One even commented the word didn't taste good in her mouth. Third, because of our awareness of this pain remaining in others, some of us are hesitant to use the word ourselves because we don't want to offend anyone. And we may even be uncomfortable hearing it for similar reasons. One member stated, quote, I can usually translate anybody's reference to God into something that is inoffensive and meaningful to me, but I always get nervous about it in a UU setting on behalf of those who tend to freak out about it. This is a strange kind of intimidation, isn't it? End quote. Even when we're trying to be nice about this topic, it seems that we sometimes offend. Now, as you may have noted, I said some do not use the word and some are offended, but certainly not all. I had several positive responses. Well, 2003 Jane then goes on to quote a few of these ways that they said they used God. For example, as representing the power of love, or ground of being, or the interconnection of the web of life. But their use of God was more about how we translate the word into something that is not theistic. None of them that answered my survey mentioned God as creator of all. And I think that is one reason that even now, though I can hear the word and translate it, I don't often use it except in pastoral care situations where I'm utilizing the language of the person that I'm ministering to. I always ride in their theological car. If I'm ministering to you as your pastor, I can meditate with you, I can pray for you, I can hold your hand. I'm there for you in your own theology and in your own comfort. But it doesn't feel authentic to me for me to use it for myself and my religious naturalist beliefs and faith when I know that most folks hear it, at least in Southeast Georgia, with theistic ears. And I don't want to misrepresent myself. Now, as I shared with you initially, much of this thinking about the use and or tolerance with God language was brought to light again for me while visiting England earlier this year for my little mini sabbatical. We went from mid-May to mid-June. So on the first Sunday we were there, we visited a Unitarian church that met at the historic Newington Green Meeting House. We love looking around the old building before the service. One thing that bothered me, though, was the signage that signaled that although they welcomed everyone, the visitors would not hear the word God used by their minister or in any of their readings because that was not the minister's theology. Now, while I'm always open and honest about my own theology with my congregants and usually preach a sermon on religious naturalism once every couple of years or so, the signage felt very unwelcoming to me. And indeed, the minister felt unwelcoming to me. Although I didn't disagree with his sermons, he and it were cold and frankly boring. I'm sad to say that he was a transport from the United States, a Unitarian Universalist. Whether or not he could say God, I felt that he needed a dose of the Pentecostal Holy Spirit to fall down upon him. The second Sunday, we visited with the Kensington Unitarians at the historic Essex Church. Now, because this church was truly the first Unitarian congregation in London, although they moved from the original Essex Street location, which we also visited, and because it was deeply and historically connected to more Christian-oriented churches through their association, it did seem a little more godly, though still left me feeling empty. It seemed so historic, but not so holy. The third Sunday, we tried something different. We attended the Sunday Assembly, a secular group that meets twice a month at historic Conway Hall, home of the Ethical Society. Again, we enjoyed the history of the building, and we rocked out with the band and the great pop music that they played. And they invited us all to sing with them. It was really good. We tolerated the speaker and enjoyed afterwards chatting with folks. No God in there anywhere. It was fun, but it wasn't worship. The fourth Sunday, we went to Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, where they lift up free speech by allowing folks to stand up on stools or ladders and share. There's a tradition of heckling as well. Surprisingly, it was all about religion, but it surely wasn't about love. It was folks screaming to other folks about why their religion was right and the others were wrong. And they were mean about it, y'all. Mean about it. We had some interesting side conversations, including being interviewed by a man who was part of a Muslim sect that emphasized acceptance and love of others, even those with differing religions, etc. Now, that little conversation included an authentic discussion of our varying concepts of God and ended with an acceptance of differences. My conclusion from our Sunday visits in London was that it doesn't matter so much if you can say or hear the word God. What matters is if you can do God, or we might say do good. And that conclusion was similar to that figured out by the 2003 Jane as she analyzed the findings of her little survey. Here she is. Now, my findings suggest that while we are a very diverse group when it comes to this matter, that's not surprising. But why am I bringing it forth, this matter, today? Is it because I enjoy a good controversial talk back? Well, that may be interesting, but that's not my reason for wanting to have this conversation. So here goes my reasoning for what it's worth. I don't believe that we as a religious movement and that we as a congregation and that me as a member are living up to our third and fourth principles. Our third principle is acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Our fourth principle is a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This place should be a sanctuary, a safe place where we can search for truth and meaning and use words that are meaningful to us in our own spiritual growth without feeling intimidated or feeling that we may be constantly offending folks when we use religious language that is meaningful to us. Also, we need to feel free to express that we have no use personally for religious language, but we do need to be able to translate and celebrate with others who do use the word God and sing with them too, and other religious language and imagery. For some folks, it's not so much a matter of theology as it is a part of their culture. And if we want more diverse congregations, we need to be welcoming of diverse cultures with diverse uses of language. We may also seem unwelcoming to liberal Christians, which is really sad since our heritage is based on liberal Christianity. By the way, we could perhaps be a home for those who now feel unwelcome in some of the more mainline churches who move farther right on many issues, if they could feel more welcoming to bring Jesus in here with them. That's my little aside there. Yeah. Now, I'm not suggesting that in order to be more welcoming, we should all start using more God talk in our language. But we should certainly work on being more open to the words that people use to express their spiritual paths. And I agree with you, UA President Bill Sinker, that we probably all need to expand our vocabulary to include ways to express what we feel is sacred and holy. We need a language of reverence. Bill Sinker quotes David Bumbaugh, who happens to be a Unitarian minister and a religious humanist, and one of my professors at the Lombard. Bumball writes, "We have manned the ramparts of reason and we are prepared to defend the citadel of mind. But in the process, we have lost the ability to speak of that which is sacred, holy, of ultimate importance to us, the language which would allow us to enter into critical dialogue with the religious community." End quote. Those who identify as humanists may take a lesson from Bumball. He states, "Humanism gave us a doctrine of incarnation, which suggests not that the holy became human in one place at one time to convey a special message to a single chosen people, but that the universe itself is continually incarnating itself in microbes and maples, in hummingbirds and in human beings, constantly inviting us to tease out the revelation contained in the stars and atoms and every living thing." End quote. Sounds like sacred language to me. My challenge to all of us here today is that we be open and that we practice those principles we hold dear. I know it's not that simple, but we can begin to have the conversations that will help us to understand each other and understand what each of us hold as sacred. So, whether your beliefs or non-beliefs are based on theism, deism, pantheism, atheism, or agnosticism, whether you identify as a Buddhist, Christian, humanist, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, pagan, just plain old Unitarian Universalists, or none of the above, or all of the above, I leave you with this hope. May the spirit of life fill you. May the Mother Goddess hold you. May the universe enfold you. May peace be with you. May the light of the world illuminate you. May the truth set you free. May the force be with you. May love guide you every step of the way. May the strength of your own mind and body give you courage. May your community of sisters and brothers lift you up and on and on and on, including those words familiar to us all. May God bless you. Amen. And thank you, my UUFS family, for welcoming the younger and older Jane to share with you today.